Good morning, everyone. On behalf of American Express, it's my pleasure to welcome you all back to the final panel of our restaurant program in 2018, Revenue Revamped. Thanks to all of our panelists for being here today. For those of you who I haven't met yet this weekend, I hope you've been having a good time. I am Emily Chin, the Vice President of Industry Development at American Express. American Express has always been about relationships with our card members as well as with our merchant partners. And the restaurant industry is one of the most important because it's really at the heart of what is so important to our card members, which is awesome dining experiences. The American Express Trade Program, now in its restaurant trade program, now in its 29th year, is one of the key platforms in which we provide the industry the opportunity to talk to each other, have open dialogue, and learn from one another. This weekend, we've heard from industry stars about lessons from their journey to success and the power of engaging and inspiring communities. We've networked, we've eaten delicious food from Ashley Christensen, as well as Jose Enrique and Renee Erickson and their teams. Thank you on behalf of American Express for your engagement in making this year's restaurant program one of the best yet. I'd like to turn it over to Ashley Christensen, the host of our third and final panel. Ashley is one of the most acclaimed and universally loved chefs on the planet. She is the owner of 5 restaurants and bars in Raleigh, North Carolina. In 2014, Ashley was awarded the James Beard Award for Best Chef Southeast. She's also a 2-time semifinalist in the Outstanding Chef category and was named Chef of the Year by Eater.com in 2017. So it is my pleasure. I'm thrilled to welcome Ashley. Please join me in kicking off the panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Honored to be here with you all today and with our panelists. First, I want to thank American Express, of course, for this incredible event. I've been attending for a couple of years now, and through this dialogue, we always take home great ideas that we apply to, just things we're working through as a growing company. So really appreciate Amex's support here, as well as the Hotel Jerome for this amazing facility and all the support over the course of the weekend. And of course, Team Baltz for just being an awesome, awesome group. And I always love working events with you guys. You're so organized and so on top of it, and that's why things run so smoothly here. So thank you very much. Today we're talking about revamping revenue, and the ideas around like alternative revenue streams and growth and expansion, which I think everyone here plays a role in and celebrates within their specific restaurant groups. So our goal is to kind of give a little bit of a behind-the-scenes view of what goes into that, and the decision-making process, the successes, the operational pieces, and also kind of the pitfalls and where we make the decisions to pivot and to shift our programs. I can't think of a better group of folks to be sharing these ideas with you right now, and I'd like to introduce our panel. To my left is Andy Chabot. Andy is the Director of Dining and Beverage at Blackberry Farm, certainly a place that celebrates a number of great ideas and experiences. Andy curates a list of over 166,000 bottles at Blackberry Farm, and under his leadership, they took home the James Beard Award for Outstanding Wine Program in 2014. To Andy's left is Stephanie Izard. Stephanie is the chef and partner of 3 beloved restaurants in Chicago, starting with The Girl and the Goat. She is the author of 2 cookbooks. She was, tying into this weekend, a Food and Wine Best New Chef, and also in 2013 took home the James Beard Award for Best Chef Great Lakes. She recently also took the title of Iron Chef after competing in Iron Chef Gauntlet. Congratulations. Next up to Stephanie's left is my friend Mike Solomonov. Mike is the chef and owner of 6 concepts based in Philly, including one of my favorite restaurants in the world, Zahav. He's a 4-time James Beard Award winner, and he's written 2 books with a 3rd book in the works. To the far left is Curtis Stone. He is the chef and owner at Maud and Gwen Butcher Shop and Restaurant in Los Angeles. He's the author of 6 cookbooks and currently the head judge on Top Chef Junior, which sounds like it must be one of the most fun gigs in the world. So he's in charge of the future of the hospitality industry. It's all on him. My first question is for the whole panel, and I'd like to know when you've opened up new restaurants or plan new menus, how much do you think about revenue and sales? How do you balance considerations of revenue with considerations of what inspires you, what you enjoy, and celebrating creativity. Want to kick it off for us, Curtis?
It's such a good question, and it's I'm not sure that I personally have even a really solid answer for you when I look back. You know, I read this question some time ago, and I look back on what I've done with the restaurants, and you know, I think the way I wish that I had thought about it from the beginning was you need to have that foundation, because if you don't have that business foundation, and you don't figure out how much you're going to charge and how many guests you need to have in per night and what your wine spend's going to be, all the boring stuff, if you don't have that block right, then there's no opportunity for creativity, because you can be as creative as you want. You go out of business and it's over. You know, you're back to being creative for your family at home. So it's you know, I think that piece of it is ultra important, and I probably didn't give it as much attention as I needed to with opening my 2 restaurants.
Sure. I think in this industry we gravitate towards the things we enjoy, and to your point, and to the point of many people who have sat on this stage this weekend and spoken about this, those pieces, those fundamentals are so essential to successful growth. Mike? I did fail to mention one thing. Mike is really cool and he looks great in sunglasses, but he got a little puncture wound to his eyeball and is required to wear these sunglasses today.
That's what I say, so I can wear sunglasses anymore. I know if I start crying too, it's not because of the questions. So thanks for having me.
Don't get ahead. Maybe because of the questions.
I'm just going to jump through the screen and get out of here. Thank you so much for having me. And I think, so I have a super smart business partner that was a finance guy before he made the poor financial decision to get into restaurants. And we always come at it with this sort of structure of like how it's going to work, what a P&L is going to look like, and whether it's going to be sustainable from a business standpoint, because as we all know, it doesn't matter how creative, how beautiful the food is, how you connect to your history, how you bedazzle people. If it doesn't make money, then you're not going to be open. What is ironic though is that when we opened Zahav, which was like our first restaurant, we almost closed the first year. We had an awful first year, and then after we started to break even, we decided to open Federal Donuts, and it was literally 5 partners that were had just met, and we put a few $1,000s in a pot, and we opened. It was enough money for us, if we lost it, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world.
Sure.
And we had essentially no business plan. And on day 2, we were like, oh wow, this could actually be a thing that makes money. So we didn't plan that out, and now we are. We've got about 6 of them, and we have to figure out actually how to restructure, and they're set up a little bit differently than the other ones. But it's interesting, 5 years into it, to look back in hindsight and say, wow, had we just thought about this a little bit longer, we would have, not hit the same sort of pitfalls that we've hit.
Sure, and I think the great thing about folks who have opened a lot of restaurants maybe didn't have a perfect plan, but they're great resources because we've made so many mistakes that are such valuable lessons. Stephanie?
I think for me it's kind of been, I think you can guess all you want before you open a restaurant what people are going to order and what your P&L is going to look like, but you really don't know until you get going. So for me, not that I really planned this, but this is how it's worked. We put things on the menu because we want to put them on the menu, and of course we try to cost them out. It's my least favorite thing to do. But we kind of wait and see what the guest reaction is and what they gravitate towards more. And if there's something on the menu that we find is having a really high cost and guests aren't really going for it, then we remove it from the menu. Or at Little Goat, we noticed we had sold thousands and thousands of orders of fries in the first year, and we were like, would people really notice if we added on $1? Probably not. And so we kind of look at things, not like we're trying to mooch off them, but we're like, let's just smartly approach it after we have some information. I think you need to, kind of be able to look back at a year, at least the first 6 months, and see what's happening and make adjustments as you go. Because I remember writing my first business plan for my restaurant when I was 27, and I was like, yeah, I think on Tuesdays we'll probably do 50 people, and they'll probably all spend $20. Okay, I was just kind of making it up. So I think it's nice to get a few months into it and really get some actual numbers, and then kind of go back and make some adjustments. That's what we've done.
Yeah, I think having also just the feedback of the community you're feeding. We have ideas, and then we put them into play, and you realize what's specific about a neighborhood or the preferences of how then when you divide your crowd and how they feel about it.
Yeah. So,
Andy.
Yeah, so our situation is a little different from everyone else's. because we're a resort, a hotel. And we tend to know the number of guests we're going to have tonight. We tend to know what works on the menu. You know, when we think of creativity in the menu planning and the seasonal change, and as we taste through things with our chef team, some are here today, and when we buy wine even, we think of, oh wow, this is super interesting to us, but we also know that we need, you know, if you don't have a chocolate dessert and a beef entree, you're not doing well, I think. You know, at least in our setting. You know, we really need to make sure we are appealing to everybody. Our guests are also with us for a number of days on end, so you know, we have this sort of different situation where we have to appeal to their likes. They're not necessarily just coming to our restaurant for one night of our food. They're with us for 3 days, and often we're catering to them. That gives us a chance, though, to really dial in the financial side of it. And we have a great financial team that really supports us, and we can be pretty much as creative as we want, and if we have to dial it back, we dial it back.
I had a great talk with some of your crew last night, and we were talking about the importance sometimes of, you guys have this amazing beer project, but sometimes it's about like earning someone's comfort and trust by putting that Miller Lite in their hand, and then having a conversation about all the other amazing stuff that's going on.
It can't be all strange.
Yeah. Mike and Stephanie, this one is for you. Who in your company is responsible for tracking revenue and for creating strategies on how you grow revenue? Rather, is it a operations director or an analyst, or is it you?
Ours has changed over the years. So when we opened Girl and the Goat, my partners Rob and Kevin were a much smaller group. Now they have like 19 operations. So now they have directors of operations within the group that kind of manage groups of restaurants. So since I have 3 restaurants that are sort of my portion of the restaurant group, we have a director of operations that is supposed to be in charge of that, and then it kind of goes to another level of a couple of directors within Boca, and then it kind of goes to my partners. I get to sit in all those fun-filled meetings myself, but I don't track anything. I just get in trouble for things after the fact. But yeah, I think what we've learned over the years, or especially what they've learned, is kind of as the restaurant group is growing, just kind of adding on more structure and levels of support. And you can't, you know, you have to learn obviously that you can't do it all, and you have to find other people you trust, and finding the backbone people that worry about the finances and kind of keep you in line and get all of the right information back to you is such a crucial part in keeping business going.
And there are people who really enjoy it. You know,
yeah,
that's like the way that we
really
feel
geek
about
out
food
it.
and hospitality.
Yeah.
That's how they feel about numbers.
Yeah,
and it's really exciting to watch.
Our director of operations, Steven, like gets so excited when he makes these spreadsheets, and I just like, I appreciate that. I guess it's how I feel in the kitchen, but I just, spreadsheets and me are not best friends.
I'm not best friends with spreadsheets either. My partner Steve is a whiz at them, and so he and we have somebody named Jillian who I actually met. She was a server when I was a sous chef at Vetri like 100 years ago. She is our controller. But what we've started to do, so we'll have like we'll analyze, but I think that the ways to sort of grow are with the people that are on the ground. So we'll analyze and we'll check out what's working and what's not, and we'll track. And then we'll strategize with the people that are actually interfacing with customers. Yeah. Because it's really difficult, I think, to make huge decisions that impact the sort of brand, you know, without like sitting in an office with people that don't have any time on the floor at any of those restaurants. So I think it starts, so I think we can analyze and then we make changes and implement those changes with the people that have the capacity to do that.
I think it's important for the numbers people to kind of get back to the creatives or the people that are out there and sort of say, here's some feedback on what's not working financially, and then you kind of work together through it. They can't just say, you need to take that off the menu, it's just not working. And you can say, but guests come in because they want to try that, so we should keep it on the menu. Sure. But sort of turn into a discussion based on those things.
Yeah, we have, I mean, it's a dialogue, and I think that it's sort of a back and forth. And there's the worst thing in the world is to be a chef and have somebody come out of an office and say, this dish doesn't work. You know, and you're like, from what basis does it not work?
Sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, cost analysis too is like a little bit weird. I've sort of, you know, I've worked for people before that are like so strict about food and labor, which we are as well. But I'm like, if your restaurant isn't at 100% capacity, what are those numbers anyways? It doesn't matter. You have to be able to have the strong relationship with the guest to have them continue to come back. Otherwise, it doesn't matter what your food cost is if you're at 50% capacity.
Sure. We've been putting a lot of energy into period-based meetings with our team where we're showing, giving full transparency to the financials, and really, it's something that I didn't really experience coming up in this field, and I think there is a real lack of financial transparency for cooks and managers and chefs, and for us, the idea is teaching people how to really run their shops and to move the needle, and then to be able to go into the world and be better operators. Curtis and Andy, I'm curious, how much responsibility do you put on your team to drive revenue? And how do you empower and inspire them to do so?
Sure. I can
go for it. Yeah.
So at Blackberry Farm, we put a lot of ownership on driving revenue in the different departments. Let's say, the beverage managers are responsible for the beverage revenue and cost side of it.
Yeah.
The food part of it is included in the rate in the hotel.
Right.
So really, the driving revenue there is making sure it's a great experience so that guests continue to come back in return. And I think we have a really great system of empowering the team to come up with new ideas to create revenue.
I can say that I've witnessed this, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
Your team putting their heads together to create incredible experiences.
Yeah. So they get to do that, and then of course it gets vetted. To make sure it works, make sure it's not taking away from some other revenue streams. Sometimes it's easy to see what's right in front of you and not how it affects the rest of the business itself. But everyone can bring ideas to the table, and many of the great programs we have now came from the passionate team members at Blackberry.
Awesome. Curtis?
It's a really interesting balance, isn't it? Because I've worked in different types of restaurant groups, some that are very focused on the management of it and the understanding of the numbers and sitting down in meetings a lot. And I've also worked in, super mum and pop, restaurants that you have no visibility at all about the numbers, and you have no idea whether you're making $5 or $1 million. You just sort of, you go through it. And I think where we've sort of landed as a team is to really include everybody in a really transparent way, like you're saying. And I think that eye-opening moment for young chefs and floor staff when they sort of understand the actual nuts and bolts of how business works, I think is really liberating for them. But I don't want to put too much of that responsibility on them so they're sitting in meetings all the time and not doing what they're great at, which is creating dishes and figuring out how, to implement the steps of service properly. So I think it's a really interesting balance. We do a little end of day report. So the manager on duty will always write, what happened that night. It's a sentence about the evening and how it went down, if we had VIPs, if there was any hiccups or problems. And then we also have all of the finances from the day, what we took on food, what we took on liquor, what we took on wine. And it's from when we didn't used to do that to when we did it, our whole business understands our business much better. And I think that's a pretty powerful place for you to be in.
Sure. And I think that, people, as I said earlier, naturally gravitate to doing the things they enjoy, but there's also a fear of doing things that you don't have exposure to and that you haven't been trained to do. And I think through that training, you end up finding the balance among your managers and being able to really partner people up in a way that's complementary and creates a path of success for them. Sometimes it's necessary within our groups and our communities to revamp a concept. Sometimes it's out of, it's not financially performing. Sometimes it's out of just want to bring something new to a community. Curtis, your restaurant, Mod, just changed approach this year. I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit, describe the concept a little bit, and then tell us about the benefits of the new structure from a revenue standpoint and also challenges if they exist.
Look, I think we talking about what Stephanie mentioned, you start and then you sort of tweak and you evolve and you change and you end up being, because it's such a complex formula, a restaurant, there's no real way to sit down at the very beginning, I don't think anyway, and plan it out and it actually work the way you planned it out, Stuff does change and your customer does behave differently than you imagine they would. And at Maud, we took on a really ambitious concept where we changed the menu every month. It was we had a couple of our chefs really close to nervous breakdowns at times. Me one of them. But it was really fun and really rewarding and challenging. But you know, we were sort of in our fourth year, we sat down and we're like, all right, what are the ingredients for next year? And as opposed to when we started, we were all super jazzed about it. Yeah. And I thought, you know, we're still full, and that's something you've got to respect. You can't sort of, you know, rest on your laurels with it. You want to be in front of it, right? If we're starting to feel lethargic about it, our guests soon will too. Sure. So we just sort of spoke about what was great about the restaurant, and then let's sort of really take those parts of it. The wine pairings was something that we really enjoyed, and the team had done a fantastic job with. And we sort of decided to, again, sort of focus back in on the team, and that's kind of why the restaurant started to begin. You know, it was sort of a personal thing. I don't have any partners for that reason. I wouldn't ask anyone to invest money in a restaurant that was probably not going to make anything. And you know, we decided to go on these incredible trips together and do 4 menus a year based around a different wine region, and it's created some real excitement within the team that both get to go on the trip and help develop the menu around it.
Can I come on a trip?
Yeah.
That sounds awesome.
It's good fun. It's good fun.
And you know, I think it's such an important point to make that changing concepts or making shifts or updates in your restaurants, like I think so many people associate that with failure of a concept, but it's really important to embrace the idea that that's evolution, and that's being a part of keeping your community and the food that's happening and the way your cooks are cooking and style of service, keeping it relevant and keeping it growing, because it really is a living thing, and you know, we have to treat it as such.
And the way we interface with restaurants is live. It constantly changes. You know, I don't know what you guys think about this, but you know, I look at how your diners behave, and it's really different than how it was a decade ago, and certainly different than how it was a couple of decades ago. And people are looking for something new. You know, you only have to pick up a news publication to see how many new openings there are each month in a city, and you think, where are the closures? I mean, how many people are closing? Because if all these people open, the demand keeps getting, the supply keeps getting larger, and the demand not necessarily. Sure. So yeah, it's like you can't just keep closing restaurants and opening new ones, so you have to find some way to evolve them, I guess.
Absolutely. Andy, what kind of opportunities do you see within a restaurant's beverage program to increase and redirect sales? How impactful are things like classes, wine dinners, guest sommelier nights?
I think this is a huge area that is changing, that we've seen change a lot. About a year and a half ago in the Barn restaurant at Blackberry Farm, I sat down with the sommelier team and said, you know, the sales are just not what we would like them to be. What's happening? You know, what's going on? We said, well, I don't know. You know, we think maybe the pairing side of things is cannibalizing the bottle sales side of things.
Sure.
And we said, okay, well, let's start doing more custom pairings. Let's start figuring out how to do something that other people aren't doing, and do it at a quality level that is astounding. You know, and how can we do that? But first, let's figure out the quality. Let's figure out, you know, let's make sure people love this and come back and do it time and time again. And almost immediately, we saw a change in just sales. And I think a lot of people are looking for an experience. And you know, there's a slight fear of commitment. A bottle of wine or this drink or something, it seems like a commitment. Yeah. Versus, you know, you're going to pour 4 different things for me throughout this meal, and they're not going to be things that I've seen before. You know, we're talking, you know, high-level beverages. So we started to see that, and we're like, wow, this is great. Now let's figure out how to make sure we make the profit. You know, we're not throwing things away because we've opened, you know, a $300 bottle to pour a glass of wine or something like that. So I think that, you know, creating experiences, adding value to something that's already there, I think really drives sales. We do a lot of daytime classes. I mean, there's only so much in the beverage side. I mean, there's like a limit, right? There's only so much you can consume. At a meal or, you know, in a period, I mean, it's natural. Yeah, challenge accepted, right?
Yes.
But, you know, so we said, well, maybe we could have daytime tastings, educational tastings. Sure. You know, and again, we saw a jump in sales leading into dinner service. Now, we're lucky we have the guests during the day. You know, we have them outside of restaurant service. But I do think there's opportunities still there for educational tastings that aren't tied to a meal period, because you have your facility and everything, you have your team. And then, yeah, we do a lot of you know, guest vintner dinners and such. And I think for us, it certainly attracts guests to the resort.
I like that when you do a guest chef dinner, you also always have a vintner.
Yeah,
with the guest chef.
For us, it's about relationships really, and you know, selfishly our relationship with the vintner and the chef. So we get to know them and get to spend time with them, and really then we can get some access. Also, you know, the vintner
absolutely.
might sneak out that case of wine that otherwise only goes to the mailing list or something like that. Then we can offer
And I
to
think
the
all
guests.
those folks also become a part of your marketing team because you
Absolutely.
provide such excellent
Yeah.
experiences.
Yeah.
Next, I want to get into a discussion on going multi-unit. And I'd love to start with you, Stephanie. In less than 10 years, you've gone from 1 restaurant to 3. Plus a catering arm, and a recent announcement about moving into the Los Angeles market as well. I'm curious what drove you. I operate similarly. I have all my projects within 5 blocks of one another in downtown Raleigh. I'm curious what drove you to open all of your projects in that specific area, and then heading into the conversation on what took you to LA as well.
It's the scary conversation. I think, so it started with Girl on the Goat, and I think for each restaurant there's been a different reason why we wanted to do it. So at Girl on the Goat, we always wanted to bake our own breads, just because I think you waste calories on crappy, dry, cold bread, and so why not just make it into an appetizer? But it was always overcrowded in the kitchen, so a few weeks into being open, I was like, wouldn't it be so great if we found a small space, turned it into a little bakery, had like 12 seats, and we could call it Little Goat, it would be so cute. It turned into this massive restaurant across the street eventually, but the idea had been because we just wanted room to bake our bread. So then the diner opened, and after we opened for a few months, I said to myself, I'm never opening another restaurant again. This is crazy, because I think the second one is very, very, it's the hardest. Because you feel like you're abandoning everybody at your first restaurant. I didn't even have a chef de cuisine yet at Girl on the Goat, and I just assumed that I would just kind of stop by the diner and kind of bounce back and forth. But the first 3 months, I was literally flipping pancakes from like 6 a.m. till 10 p.m. I couldn't get enough cooks. And so I just kind of abandoned Girl on the Goat. I truly did. And I would just like kind of call them. It's right across the street. And I'd just be like, you guys, I just can't come over. So I can't do this. I'm flipping pancakes. And so one of my sous chefs luckily kind of just turned himself into my chef de cuisine eventually. And so it took over. Then a couple years down the road, I mean, you start to have so many great people on your teams, and I've heard a lot of chefs with multi-units say this. You have all these great people, and you want to make more sous chefs, but you only have so many spaces for, I have a lot of sous chefs. I had like 5 at each of my restaurants, just because they're all awesome, and I don't know. But then you need to create more spaces for them to go work. You want to make more challenges within your restaurants rather than losing them to other restaurants. So I think Duck Duck Goat kind of came because of that. We have a private dining space upstairs, and we did a Chinese dinner one night, and I was like, well, this is so much fun. We should just open a Chinese restaurant. And chefs too, you probably feel the same way, where sometimes you just are like, you just get excited. Opening restaurants can be like the worst thing, but the most exciting thing at the same time. So I just kind of felt that itch. So we opened Duck Duck Goat, and we're able to move some team members over there. I mean, and then catering is just something, again, we just kind of wanted to add on more things to be able to share the food with other people. So that was more so what our guests were asking for. We had people say, can you cater our wedding? We're like, sure. And then that went well, and we're like, why don't we just have a catering company?
You and I get in the same kind of trouble.
Yeah, I know, it's terrible. The new Los Angeles announcement is something that scares me because, yeah, I can walk from restaurant to restaurant very easily. When it's snowing, I sometimes don't go because I'm really cold. But now having to actually fly all the way to Los Angeles is going to obviously be a much different challenge. I like to be in my restaurants as much as possible. So we'll kind of see what happens. I think I'm going to end up moving out there for a few months in the beginning and then kind of having an apartment there regularly. But for that, it's really just trying to grow the brand. So brand building has been a huge part of my restaurants. We have our goat that I wear everywhere. And it's just become a fun thing for us and our team to really have almost like a mascot and just a brand that gets behind the restaurants. But it's still within Chicago. And even though I've done some TV things and there's people on social media that are in other cities, like our food isn't in other cities. So when we come to food festivals, when I go to LA Food and Wine, and people are like, you should totally open a restaurant here. And I'm like, oh, When you think about it, it's really sunny and nice here. But that happens, in different cities. When you go to Miami Food and Wine, it's so tempting every time you go into a different city. When people say that, you're like, well, yeah, it is pretty awesome here. We were just in Austin, and I was like, I could see myself here. Or in Aspen, I could definitely see myself here. Not that I'm announcing all these restaurants right now, but but you kind of picture, see if that market would work for you. So for us, it was really important to then analyze some of the markets and go visit and see where it did seem like it could be a good fit and actually a smart first outside of Chicago thing. So we'll, again, we'll have to wait. We can make all of the sort of guesses that we want, but we'll have to wait and see how the LA market responds to our restaurants. But I know like some of our team is really excited to go move into the sunshine. It wasn't a hard sell to some people. Some of them I'm like, why wouldn't you want to move to LA? Like, what's up? It's gonna be so awesome. And some people are, knocking on, texting me and stuff like, I really want to go move there. So just an opportunity for all of our staff, and we can kind of do a staff exchange and have some cooks go spend some time there. And so it always comes back to also doing what is great for your guests, but also doing what's great for your staff and making them excited and wanting them to kind of stay with your team for the long haul.
Speaking of your branding, did you have anything to do with those baby goats on the mountaintop?
Yeah. No, but they handed me. So last night on the mountaintop, there's the big picture that Food and Wine takes for inside the magazine. And I'm standing there next to Amber just taking a picture, and suddenly up comes a baby goat that I'm holding in the picture. I was like, are people going to react to this and think it's cute, or are they going to be like, that's the woman that sells goat on her menu? The poor little goat was so nervous.
That's your support goat?
Why.
They were dairy goats, I'm pretty sure. So they will be fine. They're adorable.
To your point about the sous chefs, one of the things that that we've been learning about is building the bench. So I think it's really brilliant, actually, if you consider if someone gives their notice and how hard it is to hire someone into a management position. So the investment in building the bench is absolutely worth it when you think about what it costs you to recover from losing a great manager. And you've got people, training up and getting excited. So
I tried once to bring in a chef de cuisine at Girl and the Goat, and it was an epic fail.
It's so hard.
And so we've always found that promoting from within. We did just bring in a sous chef to Little Goat, and he's doing great. I just got an email about one of his specials from a guest that they were so blown away, and I was like, wow, they loved his dish so much more than everything I made. But so I was like, oh good, we found a great person. It's really hard to bring people into management because everybody else that's worked there for years is suddenly supposed to look up to someone that has to still learn where the cooler is and the culture especially, and get behind the brand. So we've always found it's, as much as we can promote from within we've done it too fast also, where we turn someone into a sous chef that doesn't really understand that means that they're a manager, not just that they're the best cook. So it's kind of a balance.
Yeah. Mike, one way to explore different revenue opportunities is to expand into new markets, dovetailing off of your expansion to LA. Your businesses are based in Philadelphia, but you also have moved into other cities with the hummus concept Dizengoff. What are the challenges of becoming, as advice to all of us and to Stephanie very specifically right now?
It's so fresh, and I hear you talking about flying to LA. I mean, it's a hard thing. When we opened Federal and Dizengoff and now Goldie, these are three things that are scalable. And we, in this last couple of years, I think that the dream for every chef is to open their flagship restaurant and then to do some fast casual spin-off. And to have it be the next Shake Shack or whatever, have somebody buy it and
then go to the beach.
Wealthy. Yeah. And then I get to work for you guys in LA or go on Curtis's trips, and I don't know. So everybody's like, oh, so do that, and then you can open 30 of these or 40 of these. Right. The reality is, there's too many of those. You're not going to be the next Shake Shack because there's one, and there's a very for me at least. I don't want to fly to 4 different markets to go cheerlead people in a fast casual restaurant. Sure. I love our concepts. I think they're great. I'm not the right person to do that. And I think it's really difficult now because our standards are here. So every time you go to hire somebody, you're like, well, that person doesn't know how to brunoise an onion properly. And you're like, you know what? They don't even know what brunoise means. Yeah. And we're going to be doing this. For Dizengoff, it's to be a great employee at Dizengoff, you have to be great with guests because you're part of the tipple. You have customer interface. You have to be very cool with making pita by hand for 8.5 hours a day, and you're not going to go be the sous chef at Sahab immediately afterwards if that's what you want to do. So if you don't want to be a chef, that's fine. I have a really hard time relating to those people because I don't know, that's like not my world, you know, and that's taken a long time for us to learn. So we have all these great scalable things, but at the end of the day, I don't want to fly to Miami and have to like cheerlead a team, right? And then have to like go into this new store that I don't know the first and last names of every single employee. That's also weird for me. Especially Miami too. I went like right after Art Basel, and I show up and I'm like, where is the like chicken guy? And they're like, oh, it was Art Basel. He's going to be a little late. And I'm like, what? And so I'm waiting there at the shop. I fly from Philadelphia to be there because we were short-staffed and I wanted to see what was going on. And the cook comes in and is like, I'm so sorry, chef. I got so hammered last night. And I was like, dude, couldn't you at least have lied to me? Like, they, you know, that culturally it was just so different. They were like, yeah, you know, I got hammered at Art Basel and that's it. And like, I have to then say, well, I come from a world where you would just fire that person immediately, but I can't do that to my managers because there's not a slew of a million. We all deal with this. There's not multiple resumes sitting on a pile of desks. There's not people lining up to the back door. I have to give stages my cell phone number, even at Zahav, which is like, you know, a pretty popular restaurant, just to make sure that they follow up or I can follow up with them.
Yeah.
So it's a very different way to do it. And when you go into this, like the fast casual realm, I think it's very, it's like a little bit confusing.
And it's interesting because there, I think, are two different types of employees who thrive in an environment like Zahav, and then who thrive in an environment like Dizengoff or you know, Federal Donuts. But at the end of the day, you as a chef are attracting people who want to work with you. So it's sort of hard to like meet everyone's expectations because they're going to have very different experiences in those places.
Well, I actually think that for me, the meeting and exceeding guest expectations in all of those arenas has to be, you know, it always has to be at the top.
Yeah. You
know, and we have at Federal Donuts, we have like a 4-minute window to blow somebody away.
Sure.
Right? And that's a hard thing to do. And we have like a $8 check average. And, you know, but you can still do that. You can still make memories. You can still affect somebody deeply in those interactions. But having to get we have 300 employees, getting them on the same page is not an easy thing.
And to that point, the experience, of course, is a huge part of it, probably the largest part of it, in my opinion. But how do you create value around the lower price point, fast casual concepts?
Well, I love to give away. Everybody hates me for this. I like to give away as much as I can, and I do that whenever I can in any one of my restaurants. And I actually had this conversation. My GM, who's an equity partner now at Zahav, is always like, "Chef, you got to stop with the comps." And I'm like, dude, you don't even get paid. Like, there's no bonuses for you. Like, this is me doing this as an owner. And I was like, you know, for me, giving somebody, going out of your way to give them something, in terms of like money, it doesn't mean very much to me, right? 8% of whatever revenue is a lot, but like not if we're gonna have like over 75% like rate of return for our guests, right? So I'm like, give somebody a donut that cost us like 10 cents. They will never forget that.
Yeah.
Right? Go out of
that's
your
your
way.
marketing budget too. I mean, that's
Well, it's just like it doesn't matter if they come back 3 times in the next month, then you've done your job, you know?
Absolutely.
Actually, Danny Meyer, like, and we used to rip this off when we participated in Restaurant Week. He would give every single person in Restaurant Week that came to his restaurants a $25 gift card, you know, to come back. And he was like, these are guests that are all mindful of value. And you're giving them $25, which in a restaurant, that's like $7 or something like that. That's what it actually costs us. And they will come back and bring their friends, and they will never forget that gift, you know? And if you're not doing that, in this age of restaurants opening every day, tons of them, tons of fast casual, tons of chefs flying around the country to open these restaurants, like you have to blow people away, and you have to do better than the next person. Otherwise, you're gonna close.
My first year sitting and listening to these panels, Danny Meyer sat here and talked about some of the challenges of Tabla, and going in and explaining to them that their comp line was too low, and it meant you're not sharing enough with your guest to, you know, celebrate the experience, and that's and we do the same thing. When we look at the numbers, if it's low, it's not good. You know, it's like it's below what they budgeted, but it's too low. So conversely, Andy, how do you maximize profits in luxury high-end setting where the cost of goods and labor are much higher?
You know, that's a tough question. I mean, I think it sort of dovetails into what you were saying, is that you have to add, there has to be value. There can be value at any price point. You have to exceed expectation.
Yeah.
And you know, again, we're lucky. We have a great garden. We can go, and I had dinner the other night, and the pastry chef went to the garden, picked the first, and probably all of the black raspberries that were there, and served them with some frozen sheep's milk yogurt. And that was super luxurious.
Yeah.
Cost-wise, it wasn't much. I don't think luxury is what it used to be of lobster and caviar and foie gras, super high, expensive, you know, ingredients. I think, again, it goes back to the story of where this came. I mean, I was enamored with the story of those black raspberries the other night. I think that experience, that story, that connection creates luxury. And I think that's what people are really traveling and looking for. So you can go to any great, nice restaurant anywhere in the world and get great service and great ingredients. You know,
Yeah, and I think uniqueness of an experience has really taken on a whole new value beyond just luxury items.
Absolutely. The diners and the travelers are changing. They're looking for a different experience.
Absolutely.
I mean, throwing, like back when I started cooking, putting a hunk of foie gras on anything was the measure of...
That's how you did it.
That's it. Like they're VIP. It's like put a bird on it, you know? Put foie gras or truffles on it, and it just, it loses value. It doesn't mean anything to the cooks that are reading a ticket that says add foie gras or add truffles, you know? And I think it's got to be deeper than that. Hospitality is deeper than that.
Exactly.
I feel like branding is definitely an essential part of expansion and of having just one location as well. How do you guys measure, love to start with you, Curtis, on this. How do you measure the success of press and publicity? Rather, I don't know if you do it in-house or if you contract that out, but how do you go about getting the word out, and then how do you measure the success of those ideas?
It's a challenge, first of all, because there's nothing to really measure it by. You know, we've all given up our time this weekend to come up and do something here at Aspen, and then you go back to your restaurant and you think, did it have an impact? Does it have an... You never know the answer. I think it's, you know, looking back inwardly on your team is super important. You know, it's just picking up a little bit on what we were just talking about. We have a restaurant with 24 seats and 18 staff, right? So as soon as you look at that number, you're like, well, we're in trouble, okay? And you can't afford to pay them what you would want to pay them. You can't afford to, you know, buy all of the ingredients that you would want to buy. You can't build the salad that you want to build. So, you know, you sort of... I actually read a book. It was a case study of, I think it was Mazda versus Toyota, and the book was called The Happiest Companies in the World to Work At. And it really focuses on all of the things that make you a good business that people will want to come and work at. And very little of it is about how much money you pay your staff, which, you know, the nuts and bolts of a business, that's, you know, you got to keep your labor cost in check, right? And I think, you know, creating those experiences, whether it's as simple as not buying your bread but actually baking it and having that skill in-house, you know, does it make more sense to buy great quality bread from someone that you know and trust that will deliver it every morning? Probably, you know, for a little restaurant, you know, but you know, I think overall you look back at your cooks and they're not as proud if they work in a restaurant that doesn't make their own pita, make their, you know, like little things, pick their own black raspberries. It's those little experiences. And sometimes you can create that incredible work environment without having to spend a lot of money on it. And when you're looking at PR and you know, going out into the world and doing it, your team can kind of look at that like, oh yeah, you're having a great time up in Aspen, you know, meeting all these fabulous chefs and doing all this cool stuff while we're here doing the hard work. And if you don't have a happy team that really understands the process, then the same thing happens. You know, you end up with a team that's a little unmotivated and not sort of reaching their full potential. So I think you've got to be mindful when you do press and PR. I don't know that there's a brilliant way to measure it. And it can be little stuff. You know, we have a butcher shop in Hollywood. We make all our own charcuterie with someone that's mentored me, a buddy of yours, Mike, Justin Savarino. And we like, I was at the farmer's market one morning and I'm like, why don't we sell our salamis at the farmer's market? It's a way to sort of get out into the marketplace, talk to people about it, give them a product, you know, give them an $8 salami and hopefully they come back and have dinner with us one night in the restaurant.
That's your donut.
That's our donut. It is, yeah. It's, you know, we slice a bunch of stuff, people taste it, and and then the team gets to be involved in that. And to me, that's probably way more valuable than me running up to New York and being on the Today Show. You know, we don't see this giant spike in reservations when you do bigger publicity, things like that. But you actually do, I think, over time, really win when you're out grassroots in your market.
Absolutely. Stephanie and Curtis, both of you have a relationship with television as part of your brand. What's drawn you to TV as a media outlet, and how have you balanced your TV commitments, which I assume are pretty time-consuming, with your work in the restaurants?
I mean, for me, I like having that duality of two different things. I think when my first opportunity came up 12 years ago to go on Top Chef, it wasn't something that I ever sought out. It just kind of felt, they came and approached me, and I was like, well, hey, I might as well give this a try.
Yeah.
And when I went into that world, I just kind of learned that this was a fun, different thing that I could do outside of the restaurants. And I used to, when we first opened Girl on the Goat, and people would always ask, they're like, well, you know, thanks to Top Chef, your restaurant's busy. And I would always be like, I would always be so defensive, kind of like not giving Top Chef any credit for the success of the restaurant. But over the years, I've really realized that some of the TV things that I do, even though for me it's really just fun and it's kind of gives me, like going on the Iron Chef Gauntlet was because it just sounded like fun. I'm very competitive and it gives me a competitive outlet. It seemed just like a cool thing to do for me, but I do definitely see that it impacts the business. We have people come in all the time that are still Top Chef fans, even though it was so long ago.
Yeah.
So I do, at this point, I do understand the benefits of it for the restaurants. And I think that my staff understands that, like, when I go out to do these things, even though, of course, I'm having fun, they know that it does impact, like, you know, even what my servers are taking home. Girl on the Goat's been open for almost 8 years. We're about to celebrate our 8-year birthday. I mean, that feels like 25 years. Yeah. And it's actually, business has been growing every year. And I have to, you know, as much as I sometimes don't want to give it credit, of course, a lot of it is because our servers are amazing. Our staff putting out all the food is fantastic. But a lot of people do come in for the first time because they saw something on TV. So it's kind of a balance. And for me personally, I try to balance my time. If I'm not on TV, I want to spend as much time at the restaurants as possible. I also have a family, so I think, you know, anybody out there in the industry that has all of those is trying to juggle just family and work. I have that one added thing of TV too, but I think it's just important to always connect with my staff and make sure that they know that just because I'm off doing that, I'm not in the restaurants. I still know all of my cooks. I don't know everybody's last name. I have like 300 employees also. I don't write the checks anymore, so I honestly don't know all their last names, but I know their first names. I just make sure that still having that personal connection with everybody that works in the restaurants. I still make sure that I meet anybody that comes in to apply to be a server, that I meet them before they're allowed to get hired. I think it's really important to keep that so that the staff knows that that is my top priority. And TV is super fun, and I really like to do it, and it does help bring in more people. But that the restaurants will always be at the center of everything else I'm doing.
Absolutely. Curtis?
I've had an interesting relationship with television because I used to do a lot of it, and I don't do much anymore. Well, I don't do what I used to do on television, and I took a break from the restaurant business, to be fair. I left London and moved to the States to do a TV show, which was meant to be just a little project, and it turned into a big one, and then that turned into another show. And I was sort of 5 or 6 years without a restaurant, and suddenly America was my new home, and I didn't really plan that either. And then I was here, and I was like, all right, well, I've got to get back to what I do, you know? Sure. So it's a fascinating thing. I think people that don't understand the television side of it probably think it has a much bigger impact than it actually does on your business, you know. And we have gone through ebbs and troughs, and you know, there's been moments that we've almost gone broke and we've managed to pull it back together. You know, it's a business that you absolutely have to work on, that going and doing an appearance on the Rachel Ray show doesn't fix. You know, I frankly wish it did, but you've got to work much harder at it than that, I think. And but don't get me wrong, I'm super appreciative for the opportunity to do some television and to sort of drive some sort of branding around around what you do. Any of it's valuable. You know, collaboration dinners are valuable. I mentioned what we did, and I realized how it sounded when I said we take, you know, a handful of our team to these wine regions to develop a menu, and everyone's like, it's good for you. And actually, you know, we figured out, I can't afford to do it. We figured out a way that it doesn't cost us much money. You know, we stay in pretty scrappy hotels. We reach out to like a wine region or whatever, you know, we see if someone will buy our flights to get out there, and it sounds super glamorous, and it is. We get to go and, you know, we call chefs from the region, and we make contacts and friendships and tap into people that we already know, and we get to do it, and it costs us very, very little apart from the time away from the restaurants. But we walk out of it really rich, and I think that there's really meaningful things that you can do in a marketing space that have absolutely nothing to do with TV.
Mike, you've written two very successful and very fun books with a third on the way. Do you view books as a marketing and branding opportunity for the restaurants?
We do, but it's really abstract. I think like any of these things, you know, you can't really pinpoint what drives revenue. I don't know, every time there's something that airs, like re-airs, we get like 25 people that will never come into my restaurant, but they see us on TV. And same thing with the book. The book's a little bit different because Zahav was like such a personal book. It was almost, for me, it was like actually inexpensive therapy, you know? I got to like sit down and go through what my like life story was, or my life's work, or like put a little bit of purpose to what I've been doing for the past 20 years. And also to be able to share that and build that with my business partner, you know, who had never written a book, never written anything professionally, ever. And after going through the idea of ghostwriters, he wrote the first chapter and then wrote the book and then got like 2 James Beard Awards. So to be part of that was really amazing, and to be able to, in a way, I wasn't trying to market the restaurant, we were trying to market Israel, my family, you know, the relationships that we all have in the restaurant, and it sold. So I think that's good. I don't know though, I don't know what that means for like our brand. And to be perfectly honest with you, I've only been comfortable using the word brand to describe what we have.
Yeah.
Like it's only been a few months where I can say it and not like want to throw up.
It's right
you
up
know?
there with
Right, yeah,
it's
it's
right
a
up there
weird
with product.
Right.
These
I know.
products we buy.
I know. If maybe we had cool branding like
You need
this.
But
I want
don't
one.
know.
too.
When you're talking about that, I think what's great about when a book is so personal, you're giving the people that come into your restaurant and love your restaurants, or even if they haven't been there, have heard about your restaurants, you're giving them that personal backstory, which I think that everybody craves. It's kind of the same thing that happens with social media when you share, you know, certain things. People want to see what happens in the kitchen. They want to know about your story of why your restaurant is what it is. I think that is true value for the guests, and I think that kind of makes your whole restaurant or brand just more personalized, which to me seems to be the true value.
I agree, and I think that when you start having discussions about how to like strengthen your brand, and then you do these projects that appear to be personal, it's kind of like the worst, right? So
It has to all be genuine, otherwise it's
100%. And to be totally frank, and I was like, don't ask any crazy questions but I'm gonna be, since it's only us here,
Just us.
half of the reason that I did that book was that so I could honor my brother in that.
Yeah.
So I know that every single person that flips open that book literally reads his name. And for me, that was enough. That was enough to do a book. So there's 100,000 people in the country, all over the world, that have read my brother's name, and that is enough to like, he passed away 14 years ago. That's enough for me to do the book. And then the rest of it is sort of like ancillary. Like people talk about, you know, they talk about different facets of Israeli culture that I love, that I want to defend, you know? And so it's nice when it all kind of works out, you know? But I think if you're sitting in a meeting, and I also I think that I have a great relationship with PR. I don't think that PR companies are bad. I think that we have great people that we've worked with. I love it. I don't think PR should be a bad thing at all. I think it's weird though when you start strategizing and like changing the narrative of like things that are important to you to try to get hits. Like that's when it becomes kind of ugly. So
I had the pleasure of traveling to Israel with Mike when we first became friends, and getting to hear that story in that space with you of your brother was one of the things that just made the trip so special, to understand so much more about your connection with that place. So thanks for sharing that.
Thank you. You made tomato soup for my family, and they would stop emailing me from Israel. They're like, "We really want Ashley Christensen's recipe." I'm like, "I'm not gonna ask her for the recipe."
I said,
Yeah, we'd met like once. We'd met like once before, and then we were like traveling for 10 days together.
That's awesome.
How does that happen?
I don't know. You guys should come.
I'm
to
told we
Israel
only
next
have a
time.
few moments left, so I wanted to ask you guys about, and it is a perfect segue from this last conversation. You know, we're so attached to our projects, and they're really extensions of our personalities. And I think that everyone up here, I think we demand that, and that they not just be cold brands that are just ideas that we had. Do you guys see any potential threats or downside to being so personally attached to the brand, and to being, for your personal life, being the face of these brands?
I think just that, I mean, restaurants are personal, or everything that we do is personal. I think for me, if I happen to get an email from a guest that had a bad experience, I literally I cry. I take everything so very personally that when there is something that doesn't work out, like we were talking about missteps and having to sort of rebrand things. We have this takeout window that's attached to DuckDuckGo, and this year we're rebranding it as Bao Bing, and kind of just taking one last stab at like making it work. Which I think it will, thanks to Hannah who's helped me design that name and stuff. But the first few times it just didn't work, and I would go home so sad, just thinking, why don't people want to come and eat this food that we've put all this effort into creating? And because when you take it so personally, it helps you be successful because you're putting everything into it. But when something doesn't work or something is not well received, you also take it so personally. And I'm sure that we've all gone home on days where kind of, you have to be able to bounce back the next day. But I guess for me, it's just, maybe sometimes I take every little tiny thing a little too personally.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
I think it's a real danger for big business if that's what you want to grow. It's never what I've wanted, so I feel okay with it. Being so personally attached to it, I've only ever really wanted to get my hands around something that's manageable. I've seen people, and I've worked for people that have built giant empires in our business, and I don't know that it made them any happier. I think they were probably happier when they had their hands all over the food and doing what they actually loved. So I've really tried to keep it in some way contained. I don't have an ambition to have a dozen restaurants. That doesn't mean that it's a bad ambition. It's a great ambition if that's what you want to do. But yeah, I don't know that. I think as soon as you did personally detach yourself from the restaurant, then it becomes something very different. And you've got to make that decision early on, whether that's the road you want to go down or that's the road you want to go down.
Yeah.
Andy?
Yeah, I think at least for us, I think this type of person, it's unrealistic to think that you won't be personally attached to it. It's what you love doing. And I think with anything you love doing, the danger then is you do it too much, maybe. And I think that is the challenge of being attached to it all the time, is finding balance and trying to control that, and not feeling bad because you have detached a little bit, kind of a thing. It's very, very easy to spend all your time doing this thing you're so passionate about doing.
And I think there's this feeling that you have to get to that place where when you're not there, it will be different, but it doesn't mean that that's not okay and that's not good.
Right, yeah. Other people are also really good at this.
Yeah.
So.
I'm going to take that sentence and write it down. I'm like, yes, it will not be the exact same, but it still will be.
Okay. Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I just reiterate what everyone else said. It's really, really difficult. The more and more we have opened, we have like 13 restaurants now. All I want to do is cook at Zahav.
Yeah.
I want to do that 5 nights a week. And, and I think that we talk about sustainability in so many different ways. Like, it's only sustainable if you are happy doing it. And even this last year, so Zahav just turned 10, and I've been doing a lot more travel than I normally do. And the servers had a meeting to sit me down and say, we want you, like, you need to be back in the restaurant more. And I was like, wow, millennials, man. Holy shit. I'm like, oh my God. But I was so proud of them for showing that kind of leadership. And they were right, dude. I had to sit and look at them all in the eye and say, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to do like my job, you know? I'm not flying across the country to do pop-ups because I enjoy it, but like it's not, you know, I'd much rather just be here. You have to understand my position and my responsibility, you know? But it's true, man. Sahav in particular, I love that restaurant. That is like part of who I am. I'm the most happiest when I'm there making bread, you know? And like literally cooking, because from that, there's like a station, or the bread station, and you can see everybody that comes into the restaurant, and you're like the inside expediter, and you physically make food with your hands for every single guest, which is a rare thing even for chefs that are at the restaurant all the time. It's also like you have to pass to get to the bathroom, so you see everybody. And I don't know, I just like absolutely love it, you know, and the more that I pull away from it, you know. It sucks though also when people are like, wow, that one special was so good, and you're like, I didn't even fucking know that one on the menu.
I didn't know it went on the menu, yeah, no. I don't let them put anything on that it would taste.
And then like, you know, you like look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, I suck, you know.
I'm going to break the rules and ask one more very quick question with some concise answers. When we kicked off, we talked about now all the things we learned. It's kind of funny, we didn't do this as masters. We learned a lot of very hard, expensive lessons, and now you can give pretty good advice on the idea of expansion. What advice would you give the younger version of yourself about doing this with balance?
I think plan. You've got to have a really solid plan. Because if you just act on instinct, which I've been known to do, you sort of you end up going down a path that you then have to correct, and that correction takes a long time. So I think really sitting down and just really mapping it out is an important part.
Mike?
I think just being brutally honest with yourself about the things that are important to you. Mm-hmm. And if money's one of those things, that's okay. But like you have to kind of look at yourself in the mirror and say, this is what I'm willing to do and not. And I think also the idea of understanding that in this industry, you're essentially a slave to your guest and a slave to your employee. And if you're not comfortable doing that.
And those things need to be in balance as well.
Yeah.
Stephanie?
I think just, you know, taking your time expanding and taking your time doing new things. I think a lot of times, like, I already expect that when opening day at LA Girl and the Goat, the first question someone's going to walk in and say is like, what are you going to open next? like we literally just opened today. But that happens. So I think not letting that sort of pressure that there sometimes is of other people's opinions of what you should be doing impact you, and make sure that you're kind of making the right decisions for you.
I would give myself the same advice.
Yeah.
Andy?
I mean, I think a younger version of myself today, I mean, realize what it's going to take to do it and what you're willing to do that. Like you were saying, be honest with yourself. Don't underestimate it. It's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. Sarah, do we have time for a few questions from the audience?
Hi guys, thank you very much for everything so far. Curtis, you mentioned that you noticed over the last decade, if not decades, a change in customer expectations. You run a small market, and I've noticed customers want a lot more detail and information about what they're eating, where it's from. So I'm just wondering if you see that and what you meant specifically about the changes you're seeing in customer expectations.
For me, it's more about customer behavior than expectations. And, you know, I think, I even notice it with myself. You can go to a restaurant, have a wonderful experience, tell other people about it, and consider it one of your favorite restaurants, and not go back for 2-3 years. You know, and from the restaurateur's perspective, you're like, what did we do wrong? You know, you liked us, why didn't you come back? You know, so I feel like we have to work a lot harder now, more than ever, to really establish those regular customers and give them something that they feel a part of, so that they'll continue to frequent. Oh, good. I've gone totally blank. The first part of your question.
Wanting to know where the ingredients come from and
yes,
things like that.
I think that's, you know, trends happen all the time in our restaurant business, whether we like them or not. And that's certainly a huge trend. I think it's a really valuable one. I think that guests should know what they're eating, and it's something we really encourage. And we source certain meats from our butcher shop and restaurant, from little farms, and we know their stories intimately. We go visit then we tell them. And I think that sort of storytelling, it's kind of what we do as a business. You know, we cook food and that's what we do, but we kind of hopefully tell some kind of story through it, whether it's in a dish or a book, or you know, the story that the waiter tells at the table. If you put a blindfold on everyone that walked through the front door and didn't tell them anything and just gave them stuff, it would be a very different experience, you know. So our ability to tell stories is super important.
Anyone else?
So quiet.
All right. Okay. Thank you again to American Express and to Bolt's and to the Jerome. Please keep doing this. We love it so much and look forward to it every year. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. Please visit them in their cities and go and enjoy incredible experiences. Have a great day out there. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley.